All right, y'all, this is Oldmanyates here on April the 18th, 2020, and what an amazing population of yellow trout lily we have, Erythronium americanum. This is a little past its blooming peak. It's a spring ephemeral. It's already done its blooming and made its little, this is like the little, what's left of the yellow flower, which would be about 1.5 inches or two long. Let me see if I can get that in the light. The leaves are still kind of showing that mottled trout-like pattern of blotchiness on the rubbery leaf, and this would have just been coated with blooms earlier. There are hundreds and hundreds of them. There's a little plant called toothwort here. This has a little edible corm beneath the ground that's kind of about the shape of a tooth. This is dentaria. The pioneers would grate the little corm to make a kind of a horseradishy like stuff to spice their cooking up. The funny thing about the dentaria is it holds on to strange numbers of the chromosomes. They don't separate properly, so you get a lot of variability in the shape of the leaves just from one plant to the next. You'll have some that are very finely dissected, some that are really irregularly shaped. It's just like everywhere. Here's a little bryophyte. This is a moss growing right on the surface of this limestone rock. This is a type of bryophyte that very, very primitive vascular plant that is going to predate all of these flowering plants and trees that we have around us now. These were once the dominant form of plant life. And we're going to make our way down to the creek. Here's just a little baby buckeye as we work our way down. This has got its 5-leaflet palmate leaf, and we're going to check out a really big buckeye down here, one of the bigger buckeye trees that I've seen in our area of central Kentucky. We're in the Hardin County area, new little trail that runs along a creek. As we walk down with the creek in the background, I might mention that Kentucky has more running miles of stream, creek, and river than any other state in the whole United States other than Alaska. Alaska's hard to beat with its vast territory. Here's some more of that toothwort. You are just showing how the leaf from one toothwort to another can be very distinctly different. They're spring ephemerals, so they're already starting to turn yellow. They're going to go away. They've already made their little seeds. The seeds have already been dropped, and they're about to go away and wait for next spring. They want to do all of their work. Here's a really nice specimen that's a little bit behind, and it's still making its seeds in these long linear seed pods. But by the middle of the summer, those will be all away. Oh, here's a bloom of the buckeye. You all, Aesculus is the Latin genus of the buckeye. These have a fruit that looks a lot like a chestnut, but it's poisonous. You would not want to be roasting those on the open fire. But it'll make a kind of a big tree, but we're lucky to have the little bloom of one. Now these are past their prime. They would be already starting to make their seeds. If we walk on down here, you can see this is a pretty large specimen of the buckeye tree. As you work your way up the trunk there, you can see the 5-leaflet leaves that are characteristic of the buckeye. Some people like to carry the buckeye around for good luck, but you definitely wouldn't want to get one confused with a chestnut because they are poisonous. Oh, here's a little spring wildflower, y'all. This would be one of the most common early flowering. It's Claytonia or spring beauty. It's got these linear lance-like leaves. And here's another little specimen. They aren't fully opened up. They're a white flower tinged with little pink stripes. More of our a little bit larger specimen of the buckeye. Here's one of the bigger buckeye trees that I've seen around in our neck of the woods. Growing up right here. So this is the buckeye, and it's got a little branch coming off, so you don't have to look all the way up to the top of the tree to see that distinctive palmate pattern to the leaf branching. And this just got babies spreading out all over the place here. Let's go ahead and move on over a little bit closer to the tree. Ooh, now this is a really nice type of fern. This is Polysticum acrosticoides. This is sometimes called the Christmas fern. And these are the new little fronds. As they roll out, they have these little fiddle-like structures. They're called fiddle heads. Dr. Mayer was my major professor, said that the little leaf on the Christmas fern has a little structure poking up in the back. That's Santa. He said that's Santa Claus laying back in the sled. He said if that helps you students remember that this is the Christmas fern. You'll find this still green out in the forest. This is last year's fronds that are quickly disintegrating, and that's what these will look like next year at this time. But in the winter of the year, these will still be green out in the woods around Christmas. Oh, this is the only rival to the Christmas fern in terms of being plentiful in Kentucky. This is a fern called ebony spleenwort. It kind of has an ebony shaped midrib. Oh, and here's another little colony of the ebony spleenwort coming up, and notice it's got a really dark central midrib there. The ebony spleenwort and the Polysticum acrosticoides, the Christmas fern and the little ebony spleenwort, probably the most common ferns. And you may have something like this growing in your yard. You might have a little violet, a little Viola sororia. There are a lot of species of violet. This is a very it's hard to tell the species apart, but this looks a lot like the most common one. These are an edible plant. You could take the little, you'd want to get them maybe in your yard where there's really plentiful. You won't wipe them out. They come back from underground structures. But you get the little stem and flower. You can wash them, then dip them in honey and roll them in powdered sugar and have a little plate to present at a birthday party for your kids or something special like that. And they kind of taste like honey and powdered sugar. So it's not like they have a lot of flavor on their own, but they are something that is an edible plant. There's a lot of little baby trees on the forest floor. These are little baby ash trees. This is another little ash tree. They have a compound leaf. They've got opposite branching. The only other trees in our neck of the woods that have opposite branching, where the leaves or the branches come off opposite of each other, and they have a compound leaf. Now, why is that not just a leaf with, a stem with leaves? Well, this whole structure, this whole leaf will drop off in the wintertime, making that a compound leaf. And it's a good key characteristic whether a plant has a compound leaf or whether it has a single leaf. Here's a little buttercup that you might find growing in your yard, a little ranunculus with a tiny, it doesn't have a very showy flower. This is the little flower of the buttercup. This is Ranunculus recurvatus, the little recurved nature of the presentation of the flowers, and the little coming out in little groups of 2 or 3. Kind of looks like it's sometimes called a crow's foot buttercup. All right. Ooh, now this is a nice tree. This is the tree that can get to have the largest size. We might come around this way so you can look at the trunks of this younger specimen shows the camouflage bark nature of the sycamore. If you come on around and film back across the creek, you can see from a distance those white branches as you look up the trunk of the one in the foreground. Notice the layers of bark are peeling off, revealing multicolored patterns, kind of camouflage looking. There's a report of a scientist naturalist in the early 1800s walking into a hollowed out sycamore tree at the Falls of the Ohio in Louisville. where he had a pole 20 feet long and he was turning in every direction, and the interior of the pole didn't touch the interior of the tree. Kind of helping you to understand that the living part of the tree is not that xylem conducting tissue in the center of the tree, the old water conducting tissue. That's just left over from previous times. It's providing a little structural support, but it's not the living part of the tree, which exists in the layer just beneath the bark, putting out a new layer of bark outward, a new layer of water conducting tissue, or a new growth ring inward each year. So they can rot away in the center, they can hollow out, and he reported that that tree was perfectly healthy from the outside. But can you imagine a 20-foot diameter? Very big for our neck of the woods. That would be over 60 feet in circumference. Maybe not big compared to the general Grant tree with a diameter of 42 feet out in the Sierra Nevada mountain range of California. The giant sequoias dwarf our big trees here in eastern North America, but still a pretty big tree. In the understory here, there are a lot of the little baby buckeyes. Ooh, let's check out the. Oh my gosh, let's just stop here and just get a quick look at an even more ancient kind of fern-like plant. This one's called the grape fern, and this is a little grape-like cluster that will bear the spores. The ferns I showed you before, they'll have their spores on the underside of the leaf, but this one bears its spores in a little cluster called a sporangiophore at the tip of a central structure. So they're kind of rubbery feeling. They don't feel, the texture is not like most ferns. They're a really ancient form of life. But my attention was drawn to these beautiful purple flowers that are all around on the forest floor here. This is delphinium or larkspur, a really beautiful. Ooh, wow, those are so pretty. We get some in the sunlight. I'll draw these over into the sunlight for you. Notice that each flower has a spur. This is this little tubular structure at the back of the flower, and look how fuzzy it is as you go into the interior of the flower. The bee literally crawls into that flower. The nectar is found way back in the spur, so they have to really dip their heads in there, and they get pollen all over them, and then they fly to the next flower and crawl in. If we're lucky, we may even see a bee doing that. This is delphinium or larkspur, and just a really nice, nice colony of it here. Here's some wild garlic with a straw-like leaf blade, as distinguished from wild onion. This is much coarser and bigger plant. Wild onion has a solid leaf blade. This one has a straw-like leaf blade that when you break here, it's growing a little more plentifully over here. I didn't want to touch that one, but when I pinch off just a little piece of the leaf blade, you can see the straw-like character of the interior of it. You could chop this up and put it in your salad for a little spicy, garlicky taste. You could also dig up the underground bulbets and boil those and make you some egg drop soup, or just use those like we might use onions. That's Allium venial. Here's another big specimen of the sycamore tree, Platanus, with its camouflage bark. It's got a wild grapevine climbing up it, and it's also got a really pesky, introduced, exotic plant called euonymus. This is the relative of burning bush that a lot of people will put in their yard, but if you look down there, you can just see it coating the forest floor. People years ago donated a big plot of land for the Arboretum in Lexington for University of Kentucky, and Dr. Mayer took me over there, and we tried to remove some of this, but it's just, once it gets established, it's really hard to get rid of. If I be quiet for a minute, you might be able to hear the beautiful sounds of the birds chirping here on this April morning. growing up this sycamore tree, you see a lot of wild grapevines. There's like 3 different ones that are making their ascendancy on up into the tree. Oh, there's a hawk. I don't know how closely we can follow that, but that's one of my favorite dinosaurs that we'll see flying around here. The birds are the living dinosaurs. If you ever get up to Yellowstone, drop in from the northern side of Yellowstone, pass through Bozeman, Montana, stop at the Museum of the Rockies there, and you'll see an amazing collection of paleontological artifacts. And the main lesson they're trying to teach you as you move through this museum devoted to dinosaurs is that we have living dinosaurs here today. They didn't all go extinct 65 million years ago. Our birds are native species, are living specimens of the dinosaurs. And still lots of native species of those here in Kentucky. This euonymus still just growing all over the place. Once it gets established, it's very difficult to eradicate it. As we look out into the field, something we can botanize from a distance. This is what is often called wild mustard. It's a brassica species that's just going to turn whole fields yellow. And that would probably be adequate for this